Hey everybody, Andy Morrison from Real Custom Training. Welcome back to the Better Workdays podcast. This is the show where you get free, fast, and actionable advice on how to use leadership skills and concepts to create better workdays. Create them for yourself, create them for the people around you. I don't care which one you do. You kind of can't do one without doing the other, so you pick, all right? Last episode was all about freedom. I'm giving you the freedom to pick whether you want to make better workdays for yourself or other people. This week, I want to start with one of my favorite topics, one of my favorite things to do, and that's complain a little bit about LinkedIn, because I just see so much garbage on LinkedIn. And what I saw this week that kind of I took umbrage with, I think I'm using that correctly. I took umbrage with it. What's giving me pause is that isn't the villainous lady in Harry Potter named Mrs. Umbridge, the one who like takes over Hogwarts in one season? That's making me think I'm using not quite the right word, unless I get that character would take umbrage to everything. So maybe it's fitting. Maybe that actually reinforces that I am using the right word. But the thing I took umbrage with, the thing that really ruffled my feathers, I saw it was a post about leadership development, and it was a post of for practitioners, facilitators, teachers like me. And it was talking about the need to keep your curriculum up to date, right? Which is, of course, yeah, you want to do that. I mean, real custom training, relevant, engaging, actionable, and lasting. Relevance, the first thing. Relevance, the R in real. So yes, I believe you got to keep it relevant. And part of that can mean keeping it up to date. You know, you don't want to be, I mean, imagine if you're a technology teacher and you roll into a workshop with a typewriter. Okay, people are going to say, wow, there's this thing called email. You need to catch up. Leadership development, similarly, yes, you don't want to be using outdated methods, ideas, concepts. But what would make it outdated? See, in my mind, it becomes outdated when it becomes obsolete, when it becomes less effective, when it doesn't help the people that you're supposed to be teaching, and it doesn't help them get the results that they need to get. In that case, for, a writing workshop for the modern day professional, yeah, walking in with a typewriter would be silly. But what got me with this post was they're talking about leadership development, which is more theoretical than, typewriter versus computer. And I saw somebody say, can you believe there's people out there still teaching things, still teaching concepts that were developed in the 1980s? That, in a nutshell, is my biggest problem with LinkedIn. There is so much black and white thinking. To suggest that a leadership concept or idea shouldn't be taught in 2025 because it was developed in the 1980s would suggest that there's an expiration date on wisdom. And not to get religious, because I'm not religious, but the Bible was written quite a while ago, and that still has quite a bit of significance for people and affects how people live their lives. Any number of religious texts, I see what's his name, Ryan Holiday, all over social media pumping stoicism. The ancient philosophies are still relevant today. So just because something was created in the 1980s is not enough for me to say, oh, yeah, let's take it out of our curriculum. Let's not teach that. I mean, you know what else was made in the 1980s? This guy right here. And I'm doing okay. I think I'm worth keeping around. So, yeah, that got to me. That idea of like, oh, it was developed in the 1980s. You better not teach it anymore. It's such a silly way to look at everything. And that's just, I see a lot of silly stuff like that on LinkedIn where it's just, I don't know, it's kind of bandwagony. It's kind of like scoring points not for critical thinking, but just for being critical. Say, oh, some people out there are teaching stuff from the 80s. Well, okay, what are they teaching? Is it helping their clients? Is it effective? Is it worthwhile? Those are the questions to ask, not just when was it created. And that brings me to this week's topic, because let me show you something else that, like this guy, was made in the 80s, and that's this book, Team Building Strategy by Mike Woodcock and Dave Francis. I believe, let me see. Before I probably should have double checked this beforehand, but no, the other day I looked at this after I saw that 1980s thing, and I saw that this was published in the 80s. This was published in 1981, first published in 81 by Gower Publishing Limited. Okay. It's 4 years older than me, folks. Can you believe I'm about to try to teach you something out of it? here's what I want to teach you from this book. This is an excellent book. And one of my biggest takeaways from it is their list of, they don't call it this, but I'm going to call it this. They recognize these as 11 common inadequacies of managers in the workplace. So what I'm going to call it is this for you. Okay, here's this week's topic, pulling right from this outdated relic. Can you believe it? Something from the 1980s being talked about in 2025. Here's the topic for this week: 11 reasons managers fail, and of course, what you can do about it. Okay. And listen, spoiler alert, I'm going to just let's let the cat out of the bag right at the beginning. I'm definitely going to tell you one of the things you can do about it is patronize real custom training in our programs, but it doesn't have to be us. Basically, one of the solutions is train people, help your people learn the things they need to learn to be successful as managers. And these 11 reasons that managers fail, the nice part of them is that it's skill gap. If you can get the manager on board with closing that skill gap, then these 11 reasons that managers fail don't have to be fatal. They don't have to be forever. You can fix them through learning, like so many other problems in the workplace. So let's take a look at these 11 reasons. Reason number 1 that they discovered, my boys, Woodcock and Francis, back in the way back in the 1970s and 80s. All right. And you listen to these 11 reasons and you decide for yourself if these are still relevant in the modern workplace. Because I'll tell you what, I work with modern professionals. And I mean, I guess that's the only type of professional you can ever work with, right? I'm not working with ghosts. I'm not working with, frontline supervisors, their spirits from the 1970s that are still trapped on this mortal coil. No, we all work with modern day professionals. But when I read these 11, I mean, I look at it and I compare it to my experience and the experience of my customers and the people I teach. And I say, you know what? They might have written this in the 80s. LinkedIn would tell me this is garbage, but man, I certainly see these as 11 things that are still contributing to a lack of success on the part of managers. Absolutely. That's the test. Is it still relevant? Doesn't matter when it was written. Like I said, no expiration date on wisdom. The first reason most managers fail is low self-management skills. It's ironic. I believe I'm using ironic correctly. Quick note on ironic. I may have said this before, but that song "Ironic" by Alanis Morissette, none of the examples that she gives as examples of irony, none of them are ironic, which is in fact ironic. That is what makes that song ironic. But anyway, low self-management skills. The ironic thing about it is, to be an effective manager of other people, you have to first and foremost be an effective manager of yourself. You got to have good self-management skills. Case in point, a lot of people I work with are frontline supervisors in manufacturing. And even in non-manufacturing, this can be the case. This has happened certainly to me, where you get promoted to supervisor and you had your workload, the things you were responsible for as an individual contributor, and all of a sudden you get promoted to supervisor. And someone else takes all that stuff you used to do, they take it over for you. No, that's not what happens. You get promoted to supervisor and all the other stuff, or most of it, stays on your plate. And now you're asked to additionally take on the responsibility of overseeing and managing the performance of other people. How are you going to do that if you don't have top-notch self-management skills? If you can't manage your own time, if you can't manage your own energy, if you can't get yourself organized and follow a project plan, and even my anxiety is going up just describing it, because self-management is my biggest growth area. So yeah, low self-management skills, it makes sense that of course that's a reason many managers fail. But I think what can happen, like I said, it's ironic. It's kind of counterintuitive that you got to really focus on yourself and your own skills in order to lead other people. I think sometimes you can get promoted to a leadership role and you're so fixated on the other people aspect of it that you might not grow and develop in the self-management arena. And one more note on that. Self-management, I mentioned time and energy, right? It also includes emotional management. You gotta be able to control your own emotions when you're a manager in the workplace. Perhaps paramount is frustration. When the stuff hits the fan, How do you do? When you've got that person on your team that really irks you, how do you do with them? I'm not saying they're not going to make you angry. I'm not saying it's wrong to be angry, nothing like that. But as I always say, like, who's got the steering wheel? Is it you or is it your emotions? Because if it's your emotions, that when that person frustrates you or that situation frustrates you, you're going to lash out. And you can't do that as a leader and as a manager in the workplace. Not the kind of workplace that good employees will want to work in. You cannot get away with that there. All right, number 2 on the reasons managers fail: unclear personal values. So I've talked about this before. If one of your core values is honesty and integrity, then that's going to dictate how you manage people. If you really value your integrity and your honesty, then you're not going to use manipulative tactics to get employees to do what you need them to do. So sometimes it can be not knowing those personal values, not being in tune with them, that can lead managers astray, where they may end up relying on tactics and practices that don't really get them the long-term results that they need. They say in leadership, you really have to know they call them your core values, your personal values, really what makes you as a person tick, and how can that guide you when things get tough as a manager, when you've got a tough call to make. And the textbooks or podcasts like mine or your boss, nobody can quite tell you exactly what you need to do. You're going to have to rely on your own personal values to make those tough calls. So, of course, if managers aren't clear on what's driving them internally, it's going to have an impact on what they do externally. It's going to affect their behavior as a manager. And if they're unclear, that effect is probably not going to be positive. Similarly, the third reason, confused personal goals. This can be a personal goal for you as a manager, as an individual, and it can also mean confused goals in terms of for your department and for your organization. Sometimes managers can fall into the trap of having a goal for their department, for their team, and they find out too late that their boss had a different goal in mind. All right. We can't take for granted how often there are assumptions that people are on the same page. And as a workshop facilitator, I can tell you, I literally see people not be on the same page. And I mean that in the sense that they'll work on a flip chart together in a workshop about priorities for the department. And one of them will put an entry on there. And then the boss will put an entry on there. And then the boss looks at what they put as the top priority, and they look at what their subordinate put as the top priority, and they do not match. And the boss says, wow, didn't realize we weren't on the same page with this. Tell me why you think that's the priority, and I'll tell you why I thought this was the priority. So confused goals can sink a manager. Lack of personal development. This is where, the sales pitchy part comes in. Personal development, basically, do they have the skills that they need to succeed as a manager? Have they developed themselves enough to hit the ground running and then continue to grow and develop as they go? Lack of personal development oftentimes can really sink people. And this can mean, you hear that? Sorry about that. My new keyboard, I'm moving it to, it's a terrible noise it's making. The lack of personal development, it can mean that you just don't have the skills yet to be a supervisor. Like I mentioned, emotional regulation, right? Let's say you have a real lack of it, but you get promoted to supervisor. Now you're somebody's manager. Well, if you've got that lack of emotional management due to a lack of personal development, then you've got to catch up quickly. Some people do. Again, this is why it's so important to provide new managers and supervisors with training so that they can start closing that skill gap if they've got it. But that lack of personal development, if they've got it going into the role and they're not given the chance to then start the personal development engine and start taking workshops and classes and being mentored, then that is going to sink them as a manager. Low problem solving skills. How many times do bosses get upset with people for coming to them without having tried to solve a problem? If you're the supervisor of a department, you can't keep going to your boss with every problem and ask them for a solution. You've got to be able to solve them yourself. Similarly, low creativity is the next reason. Sometimes people, when we say creativity, I find people sometimes tend to think that must mean the classical sense of creativity. Oh, painting, drawing, molding, theater, all that, poetry, all that kind of stuff. Not necessarily, right? It's really about out of the box thinking. It's about not getting locked into one way of looking at things and thinking about things. And one of the best examples I ever saw that highlighted how even, professionals who don't think of themselves as creative really have to be. We were talking about this in a workshop once, and Rocky Blunt and I, and one of us asked the group, how many of you consider yourselves creative? And not many hands went up. And then I said, okay, tell me how you responded to COVID. And they started telling me about some of the changes they made, policies they enact. And I said, that all sounds pretty creative, right? The COVID crisis forced a lot of people who perhaps don't think of themselves as creative to get creative. That's what we mean about low creativity in management. If you can't get creative when you need to, you're going to fail as a manager. That's one of the reasons. And then low influence. Yeah, if you can't influence things, you might have clear values, clear goals for the department. You might have some of the skills that you need, great emotional regulation, great self-management skills. But if you can't get an initiative passed, if you can't get buy-in from the bosses, and if you can't get buy-in from your people, you're not going to get anywhere. Leadership is essentially influence. That, in a nutshell, there's all sorts of definitions for leadership out there. There's all sorts of ways to think about it. The closest one for me so far is the notion that leadership is influence, intentional influence to make things and people better. If you have low influence, you will likely fail as a manager. And then lack of managerial insight. This basically means, and they said this in 1980, and of course, I think it's still relevant today. Woodcock and Francis said lack of managerial insight basically means they've got very outdated ideas of what it means to be a boss and what it means to be a leader. So if you've got kind of that old school hard ass approach of, all right, let's take the topic of recognition, right? If you've got that old school idea of, hey, if you want applause, join the circus, right? Or you're only ever going to hear from me when things are going bad. I don't think that's going to serve you well in 2025. There's studies out there, and anecdotally, through my own professional and personal experience, I know your top people, the people you want to retain, they need recognition. They don't need a ticker tape parade every day that they walk through the door. They don't need an attaboy or attagirl every time they get a task accomplished. But sporadically, once in a while, and with genuine feeling behind it, they need to be recognized for what they have accomplished on behalf of the organization. If you remember the last episode, we talked about the 6 core needs. Achievement is one of them. Growth and achievement. People need that. We need it as a species, as a human being. And part of that too, we need to be recognized for it. There's very, 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 very few people on the planet who do amazing things and nobody knows about it, right? To varying degrees, it's a human need to have some level of recognition for the great stuff you're doing. If you don't believe that, that might be an example of you lacking managerial insight that's going to help you succeed in 2025. Oh, hold on. Hi, Emily. Hey, I'm recording the podcast. So is this, what's up? Yes. Yeah, that'd be terrific. Oh, thank you. All right. Love you. Bye. All right. Emily's going to pick up the second kid. The other kid's at her friend's house swimming. So I got more time, man. I thought I was under the gun. Oh, I don't have to rush anymore. Oh boy. Oh, we're almost at the end of this anyway. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe this will just be a warm-up episode. Maybe I'll do this again tomorrow. But anyway, and then, all right. Lack of managerial insight, kind of how you're thinking about what it means to be a boss. Poor supervisory skills, the next reason so many managers fail. Poor supervisory skills is just the meat and potatoes of overseeing, monitoring, and adjusting other people's behavior in the workplace. That's my favorite definition of what it means to be a supervisor. In fact, We'll give them a plug while we're at it. That is directly from this book, Supervisor, Manager, Leader, by, I believe it's Mike Krause. Yeah, Mike Krause. He was a chief of the New York City Fire Department, and he defines supervising as overseeing, monitoring, and adjusting the behavior of other people in the workplace, so the performance of other people in the workplace. And what I love about that definition, and I always ask people this when I share it in a workshop, I always say, what's the most important word in that definition? Sometimes they'll say overseeing, sometimes they'll say monitoring. Most of the time, we all very quickly come to the conclusion, oh, it's adjusting. That's the job, is the adjusting. Imagine if they said, hey, you know what, from now on, the only thing you need to do is monitor everybody's performance. That'd be a cakewalk. It'd be an absolute cakewalk because you're not asked to do anything but monitor it. So if the performance is awesome, you've done your job. If the performance is terrible, you're still doing your job because all you have to do is monitor it. It's the adjusting. That's the rub. That's the really difficult part. Oh, if you had perfect employees, and I mean literally perfect employees, then all you would have to do is monitor and oversee. But as we've all learned, unfortunately, with one exception, this guy right here, nobody's perfect. I'm just kidding. I was wrong once. I was wrong one time. I'll admit it. But nobody's perfect. So of course, it's the adjusting. That's the job of being a supervisor, is adjusting that behavior. And what people learn right away is it's not as simple as saying, hey, do this, do that, change this, change that. There's all sorts of tools and skills that you need to actually adjust people's behavior in the workplace. And when you don't have those skills, it stands to reason. Back in 1981, when they wrote this book, and today in 2025, if you don't have those skills, you're not going to succeed as a manager. This one might surprise you. I don't know. I'd love to reach out on social media. Tell me if this surprises you, but they identified low training ability as one of the downfalls, one of the contributing factors to the downfall of managers. And this really spoke to me because Rocky Blunt, one of my instructors, my mentor, Dr. Rocky Blunt, and I, a few years back, really came to the conclusion after working with so many supervisors and managers that, oh, wow, they don't have trainer in their title. They might not be formally on a piece of paper designated as a trainer. But again, we're talking about adjusting behavior, right? Of course, you have to be able to train people. My goodness, it's an absolutely essential part of being a boss or a supervisor. But what I've noticed can happen is organizations will have a training department or a training officer, or, in manufacturing, maybe a new employee gets paired up with a trainer for a year, the first year or something like that. And then that person gets out of the training. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, your time with that trainer is done. Likely that person's need for training is not done, despite the fact that they got the training they needed to last the year and become permanent, but from then on, any training that they're going to need is going to have to come from their immediate supervisor. So in a lot of ways, whether, again, like I said, whether you have trainer in your title or not, if you're someone's boss and you're adjusting their behavior and they got to learn new things, you got to be able to train them. Training, like supervising, is a whole different job. You could say, Andy, you're great at running workshops. Thank you. Oh, I really do appreciate that. Wow. Andy, you're great at running workshops. We need you to train this group of people on how to run workshops. The fact that I'm good at running and facilitating workshops does not mean I will be good at training other people on how to do it. This is it's like the curse of the subject matter expert. You take a subject matter expert and you say, wow, you're an expert in that subject. I bet you'll be able to teach it. Not if they never learned how to teach. Same thing with training. Just because you know how to do something doesn't mean you necessarily know how to train people on it. Training is an entirely different job. Just like when you're good at your job and you get promoted to supervisor, it doesn't mean you're going to be a good supervisor, because supervising is a totally different job with a totally different and unique skill set. So is training. Give your supervisors training in training, okay? Do them and yourself and your organization and the people that report to them a favor. Give them some fundamental training in how to train other people. how to help other people learn and perform in the workplace. And then lastly, low team building ability. Okay. This is an upcoming episode as well. I'm working on an episode right now called What Does Team Building Actually Mean? Could probably do a whole series, the Actually Means series. Maybe that's title TBD. But, what does leadership actually mean? What does supervising actually mean? What does team building actually mean? Low team building ability means, one, usually when we think of team building, we think about assembling the team. Okay. The Nick Fury in the Avengers role, bringing the team together. Okay. That's team building, but it doesn't end there. And sometimes our conceptual understanding of team building ends there. Oh, we brought the team together. We built the team. The other misconception about team building is that it's all social, pizza parties, going rock climbing together. Those things help, but that is not in and of itself team building. Team building means not only assembling the team, but facilitating the development of that team until it is highly productive and performing well together. And like I said, I've got an upcoming episode about that where we'll really dive into it, but it's a process. It's a process. Like I said, I use the example of Nick Fury in the Avengers movies. If team building consisted only of assembling the team, then that first movie, The Avengers, when he actually has assembled the Avengers and he's got Iron Man and Hulk and Captain America and is bow and arrow guy I guess Hawkeye is an Avenger, even though he's so lame. He brings them all together, the teams. That movie would have had much less drama if team building ended there, because that would mean the team came together and immediately performed the way it needs to. Did that happen? Those of you that saw that movie? Of course not. A big bulk of that movie is about them fighting with each other, not getting along, not performing. I said there's a whole episode on this, and now I'm getting into it, but there's different models for team development, and the one I like, God forgive me, please, I don't remember the name of the people that came up with it. I want to say Druckett, but I think that might be a different one. But the model I like is the forming, storming, norming, performing model. Forming, you bring the team together, you get the Avengers together. Storming, all right, the team's together, but they are not getting along. Iron Man and Thor are fighting each other out in the woods. Hulk's breaking the ship apart, Forming, storming, norming. Norming is starting to come up with the rules for the team. How are we going to get along? How are we going to make sure we control Hulk? How are we going to make sure Iron Man and Thor aren't fighting in the woods when we need them stopping Loki? Okay. The team figures that out. Team building means the leaders helping them figure that out. And then you're at performing. Okay, we went through it. We're done fighting. We figured out how we're going to coexist and work. Now we're performing. So team building means understanding that and guiding a team through all of that. So those right there are your 11 reasons managers fail. And like I said, this is from this book that people on LinkedIn might say, oh my goodness, they're teaching something from the 80s. That's because it still is relevant. Like I said, at least in my experience, probably in yours, I'm guessing. And look, I got all 11 of them up on the screen here. Managers fail because they have low self-management skills. They're not clear on their personal values or goals. They haven't done the personal development they need to do. They got low problem-solving skills, low creativity, and low influence. They got lack of managerial insight. They got outdated ideas that aren't going to help them get the job done in the modern workplace. They lack the meat and potato supervisory skills that they need, and they don't know how to train, and they don't know how to team build. I think that still matters today, despite the fact that these concepts in this book were written down about 40 years ago. So don't fall for that trap that you might see on LinkedIn of poo-pooing and dismissing things because of how far back the idea originated from. If it's still relevant and still helpful, it's worthwhile. And that's why I wanted to look at this list with you. And like I said, we're going to look at what can you do? What can you do about this? Well, oh, hold on one second. My graphics department is messing up. Uh-oh. All right, here we go. Oh, geez. I am all over the place with these graphics. How do I get this one off of here? Oh, I got to stop sharing. Speaking of COVID, wow, that just gave me a flashback to like fall 2020 or spring 2021. Oh, wait, I need to stop sharing. or you're muted. Michael, you're muted. We can't hear you, Michael. God, COVID sucked. I mean, millions of people died. That obviously was tragic as well, but also the inconvenience of so many Teams meetings. I'm sorry to make light of that. 11 reasons managers fail. Here's what I got up on the screen for you. If you are, I'd say within an hour's drive of Putnam, Connecticut, this graphic is for you. Okay. 11 reasons managers fail is on the left, the 11 we just reviewed. And to the right, the workshops covered in Real Custom Training's Level Up Leadership Program. This is part of why I loved reading that book and reading this, because for me, when I read this list of 11 reasons and I come to the conclusion, you know what? I think this is still relevant. I think I see this. I think I experienced it. You know, I've said before, I was not the best supervisor and manager when I was in those roles in different organizations. And some of this is, like I said, I just realized I say like I said a lot. I think I'm saying that way too much in this podcast. I got to work on that verbal crutch. But as I mentioned earlier, low self-management skills, that's my growth area. Unclear personal values, confused personal goals, those got in my way a little bit. Lack of influence certainly kept me from succeeding as a manager at times. You know, I was a director, so as a manager, supervisor in the community college system when they were consolidating them, right? They were taking influence away. I mean, that really got in my way. And like I said, oh, there it is again. As I mentioned previously, the low self-management skills, the unclear personal values, the personal goals, all of that is within your control as a manager. That's what you got to remember. All of that is within your control as a manager. You can go out and develop those things. The example I gave of, you know, the consolidation taking away influence, that's kind of me playing the victim and blaming them. You know, that didn't stop me from developing the skills I needed. So yes, some obstacles, some external things will get in the way of your success, but most, if not all of these items, you can tackle on your own. But the reason I'm putting these up side by side is when I read these and I say, all right, these are relevant to me, they seem relevant to my customers. Then the next question is, all right, well, is our programming at Real Custom Training addressing these? You know, if these are such a common issue and still to this day, as they were in the 1980s, getting in the way of managers succeeding on behalf of their organizations and themselves and the people that report to them, if that is the case, are we responding accordingly? Do we have programming and training that can help people avoid these 11 contributors to managers failing? So I put them side by side for you here. And to me, I'll go down this list very quickly for you. Workshop 1, developing a growth mindset. That is key for low self-management skills. That is key for personal values, key for personal development. You cannot develop as a professional if you have a fixed mindset about your ability to do so. Smart goal setting obviously ties to number 3 with goals. Building confidence and assertiveness, self-management skills, influence is right there. Managing your time and energy, again, ties into the self-management skills. Prioritization and personal efficiency is right there with them. Emotional intelligence in action. That is so key. You gotta be able to be intelligent enough about your own emotions to help you regulate them and control them so you're not flying off the handle, so you're not getting so distraught that you freeze up and you don't get anything done that day. There's all sorts of ways that emotional regulation can make or break you in the workplace. Supervisory styles, the second part of Level Up Leadership. Communication styles, earning influence, delegating effectively, giving feedback for growth, managing crucial conversations, dealing with difficult people. Those are the supervisory skills mentioned in number 9, right? We have a program that can help you develop those fundamental skills in your employees. And then in learning to lead, leading with listening, coaching skills, team building strategies, core conflict management styles, running meetings that matter, problem solving strategies. Look at our list and look at the list of 11 reasons managers fail. And I think you will conclude that our Level Up Leadership program is a great way to help make sure your managers and your organization are not falling victim to these 11 common reasons that many managers fail. It is a skill gap. It can be overcome through learning. Real Custom Training can help you do that. So if you're within a 60-minute commute of Putnam, Connecticut, we've got this program running in the fall of 2025. Sponsor your employees into it. Have them come spend the morning with us once a week from 9 to 12, and they will walk away with the skills and the knowledge and the attitude that they need to make sure that these 11 reasons managers fail do not get in their way. All right, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me for Better Workdays. I think my camera's out of focus. This has kind of been a technical. Is that out of focus? I always look to the moles. Okay, now it's in focus because this mole just came sharp. I can see it clear as day. It's always bigger. Every time, whenever I pay attention to them, they're so much bigger than I think they are in my head. But anyway, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Like I said, upcoming episodes will cover what exactly team building means. We've also got some, let me open this up. Let me take a look at what we've got coming up for you. Oh, I am working on my I can't wait to do this one. Leadership Lessons from Santa's Village. My podcast producer had told me to make sure, obviously the podcast is a vehicle to explore what's interesting to me. But Menners did remind me, he said, don't get too self-involved. Make sure there's always that leadership value in there. So Santa's Village, I am going to make sure there's actual tangible leadership takeaways. We're going to do one on leadership lessons from the movie The Batman with real tangible takeaways for you. We've got upcoming episodes on the conspiracy of niceness, as well as what's wrong with your company. You ever have days at work where you just go, why can't we get our stuff together? What is going on here? I've got a model for you. Another one from the 80s. I've got a model for you that can help with that. And then lastly, we're working on one on core competencies. If you want to make sure your managers and supervisors don't fall victim to the 11 reasons that managers fail, developing a core competency model specific to your organization and integrating it into your job descriptions, your performance review programs, your incentives, your career pathing. A core competency model will go a long way to make sure that those 11 things don't stop your people from succeeding. So I will see you on the next episode. Thanks as always for tuning in.